think anglers all over the world, they do perceive us carp anglers as a bit of a funny bunch. And you can kind of see why. We go for days, possibly weeks on end, mountains of gear, tip up somewhere, chuck loads of bait in, with the hope of boring out big bertha to give it a big kiss and let it swim off again. And I suppose to a degree, I can kind of see where they're coming from. I do feel myself that carp angling is a little bit different to the other disciplines of angling. The main thing for me is the most common way that we go carp fishing, and that is sitting behind static rods with bite alarms. All the other forms of fishing I've ever done, whether that be float fishing, sitting there watching the float, it twitches and then flies under, I naturally strike at the bite. Quiver tipping the same, the tip sort of starts to bounce and pull round, I'll strike. Maybe I'm fly fishing and I feel a pluck on the line, set the hook. Lure fishing, big predator comes and slams a jerk bait, again I'm striking. But with us carp fishermen, in this sort of static form of sitting behind bite alarms, we are totally reliant on those to give us our indication that something's happened down at the lead end. And a lot of the time, we do miss out on those vital pieces of information, those bites. How many times in a session are we getting done? Around 7 years ago, we launched the R3 into the marketplace, and it really did revolutionise bite indication. It involved speed sensing, which kind of eradicated a lot of false beeps, meaning that when a Siren R3 beeped, we would immediately get up because something had genuinely happened out there. Fast forward 7 years and we've launched the R4. The R3's gone nowhere, it's still in the range. It's a fantastic product, but that 7-year period allowed us to now bring the R4s into the marketplace. I think for me, the main point is the sensitivity settings. Unlike the R3, the R4 now has 5 sensitivity settings, and a lot of the feedback we had was the R3's fantastic, using sensitivity settings 2 and 3, incorporating that speed sensing, really did allow you to eradicate wind beeps. It really did allow you to eradicate the annoyance of potentially a piece of weed hitting your line in the night and that bobbing creeping up. You can eradicate all those false beeps. On the R4, sensitivity setting 1, exactly the same as on the R3. 2 and 3 also the same, incorporating the speed sensing. But we've now got levels 4 and 5. Number 4, it does incorporate speed sensing, but there's a delay of 15 centimetres. That means the bobbin could rise up 15 centimetres, down 15 centimetres, up 15 centimetres, and so on, and you will never hear a beep. Therefore, if you're in a situation, maybe fishing a large pit, and there's huge, great big waves lapping against your line, and that bobbin's flying up and down, you'll never hear a single beep until it passes that 15 centimetre point, and immediately it goes into speed sensing, and you'll get an absolute accurate indication of how much that lead's been picked up, moved, fish shaking the head. Sensitivity setting number 5, that really is quite extreme, but with the trend right across Europe of more and more people wishing to fish from boats, primarily because they can get into really great areas where the carp are living, those anglers, they really did require this 5th sensitivity setting, and that is 30 centimetres of line movement. That means the bobbin can go up 30 centimetres and down 30 centimetres, up, down, without hearing a single beep. And those guys, they need that because of the boats. The boats are rocking quite significantly like so. The whole tips of the rod are moving up and down. And those anglers now with the R4 and that 5th sensitivity setting will never get any interference or beeps they don't need to hear about. The moment it passes 30 centimetres, it goes straight into speed sensing and they're getting absolute accurate information of what's happening out there. The other thing to note with sensitivity settings number 4 and 5, where the line's moving 15 or 30 centimetres, is after a very short period of time, it will reset itself. Where that would be really useful, for example, is if you're fishing and a swan swims into your line, moves it more than 15 centimetres, for example, and then goes into speed sensing, but then the swan swims off. If you just sit and wait for just a very short period of time, the head will reset itself and go back into that function of 15 centimetres. So for me, the biggest advancement with the R4s is that literally now, it doesn't matter what fishing situation you find yourself in, whether it's in the depths of winter and you want absolute maximum bite indication, potentially even fishing for liners, fish it on level 1, or if you're fishing, for example, on a huge lake somewhere in Europe from a boat, the boat's rocking in a big storm, you can put it all the way up to number 5 and you can eradicate all false beeps. Another brand new and unique function for the R4 is drift mode. It works in conjunctions with settings 2, 3, 4 and 5, which are the speed sensing settings. Drift mode is a function that you probably wouldn't find yourself using very often. Well, you don't need to, it's just built in and there for you. It's kind of more of a safety measure. To give you an example, some weeks back I was fishing a large lake that was littered with crayfish pots all over the bottom. I basically had to fish with a very, very loose clutch on the speed sensing settings. The loose clutch was a necessity because I didn't want the fish picking up the rig and then under tension grating on the cray pots and cutting me off. Because of that, during the night, a large bank of weed came and hit my line and started to very slowly tick the spool over, releasing line from my reel. Because I was fishing with one of the speed sensing settings, the line coming off the reel was very, very slow, just a tick, 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 and it wouldn't indicate with the normal speed sensing settings. However, with the drift mode function being built in there, it's a guarantee that after every 3 meters of line that's pulled off, you get a really significant warning. That particular night, I was woken up with this great big bank of weed hitting my line, only to realise that the drift mode had been activated and it was not in fact a fish, it was actually this weed pulling my line off the clutch. As I say, it's unlikely to happen in many, many instances, but there'll be the odd example out there where you'll have to fish in a specific kind of way and the drift mode is a safety feature to allow you not to wake up in the morning and find your spool completely empty of line. One of the first noticeable differences between the R3s and the R4s is the LEDs. First of all, the actual shape of the LEDs, they're not off the shelf. We've specifically moulded and designed them so they wrap around the case more, which means it doesn't matter which side of the rod you're sitting on, you get a much more clear line of sight of the LED once it's flashing. Previously, we only made one of the LEDs pulse. On the R4 system, now both LEDs pulse. But the bigger thing regarding the LEDs is you can now change the colours on your heads. There's 5 different colour options available in 2 different brightnesses. Now, I thought to myself, I don't really need that function, I always fish them on blue. However, having tested the product now for 2 years, I really would be lost without this function. What it's allowed me to do is, maybe for example a zig rig or the washing line tactic, I'll fish those rods on red LEDs, which means if I'm in a deep sleep at night and I wake up to a couple of beeps and look and there's a big pulsing red LED, I am out of that hide and I'm on that rod, because 9 times out of 10 something's happened. You can also use it to, for example, mark left and right. I'll often, my right hand rod make that red, but really the option's yours. It basically gives you a lot of flexibility to chop and change the colour, whether that's just for personal preference, red, white and blue for example, or whether you actually want to use the ability to change those LEDs to aid your indication. Sticking on the theme of the LEDs, with the R3 system, we did have a function where you could mute the head, which was a really useful feature when you were fishing somewhere busy and you didn't want to disturb other anglers while you were setting your bobbin. On the R4s, there's now 4 different settings. The standard setting where you've got LEDs and sound, or you can just have sound but no LEDs, or you can have just LEDs but no sound. There is a full covert mode, which allows you to completely disable LEDs and sound, meaning that the only indication you get will be your receiver, and even on that you can completely eradicate the sound, meaning it will just vibrate should you need it in certain situations. Another new setting that wasn't found on the R3s is the drop back tone. It's a double beat differentiation tone and it is incredibly useful. It means you can be sitting there tucked up in your hide at night and you can hear that doo-doo, doo-doo, and know that you're definitely getting a drop back. You might get beep beep forward, doo-doo, doo-doo, backwards, and you know it was just a liner. However, you could be fishing and get just a series of drop back tones, doo-doo, 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 knowing that definitely something has moved the lead out there. I find it incredibly useful, and the sheer fact that it's a double beep going backwards as opposed to just a different tone means that I can actually fish my rods on different tones, but I always know when it's a drop back because of that doo-doo, doo-doo. We've also increased the volume settings to 8 options, tone settings to 8 options. We've changed the battery types from the CR2s to straight AAAs in the head now, meaning 24/7, 365 days of the year, you'll be able to easily get batteries. We've also changed the receiver to rechargeable USB-C. You get a low battery warning when it's running down, so you can chuck it onto your power pack or maybe recharge it on the way home. The range on the receiver is noticeably better. I'm not suggesting you fish 200, 300, 400 meters away from your rod, but punching through dense vegetation or potentially even stone and rock. The LED colours on your head and your tones are directly replicated to your receiver. We've developed a brand new dedicated range of swingers and bobbins. working off an MMCX adapter that fits directly into the port on the front of your head. The really unique thing here is there is no drain on battery. There are a number of illuminated bobbin systems on the market, but they do significantly drain batteries. I remember once being out in Italy, looking at loads of anglers fishing with illuminated bobbins, but none of them actually had them plugged into their bite alarms, and that is because they're constantly drawing power, draining basically the head's batteries. Our system doesn't. It's only when you get a direct indication on the bite alarm itself is any power drawn into either the swinger or the bobbin head, meaning the battery life in your head really does last for a phenomenal period of time. On this point, if you don't want to use one of the dedicated illuminated swingers or bobbins, we do supply the heads of an MMCX adapter that will allow you to fish with any bobbin system you choose. I think finally, the last kind of main big difference between the R3s and the R4s is the fact that there is a third LED, and you wouldn't notice it unless you went around the back and looked at the reverse of the alarm. Yes, it's on the back, and you might think to yourself, why have they put an LED there? Again, lots of feedback from the likes of Mark Vusen, Samir, and the other guys out there doing it regularly in Europe is they wanted a system that would allow them to return to bank after maybe placing a rod or playing a fish safely without getting caught up in other lines. When I say safety, I'm not talking about angler safety, but this particular function could save your night. Let me give you an example. You go out in the lake playing a fish or to replace a rod. You're out there, it's dark, maybe the fog or the mist starts to lift off the lake and you start to become slightly disorientated. Before leaving, you forgot to turn on a bivvy light or a head torch, and you're out there now and you've got no idea where your swim is. This new system on the bank, should you take your receiver with you, allows you with one push of a button to activate the reverse LED and it will start flashing. You can either choose head option 1, 2, 3 or 4 to come on independently, or you can have all 4 heads come on at the same time. This means from ranges beyond 250 metres, I can see those LEDs and I can navigate perfectly back to the bank. If I'm placing a rod, this will allow me to get a really straight line going back to the bank, or potentially if I'm fishing my rods very close together, I'm not going to get the prop of the engine caught up around one of my lines. This could literally ruin a session. If you've not taken spare spools with you, or you've got spare braid on one with you, you could literally empty a spool, and yeah, as much as it's not saving you, it could save your session. So there you have it. That's a quick glimpse into what I really love about the new R4s. I've been using them for the last couple of years, as have plenty of other anglers. It's so nice that they're finally out. I hope you guys can see the virtues of them too. And when you get out there and get using them, they really will make a difference to your fishing. And I know this is a big statement because at the end of the day, it is a bite alarm, but I'm sure if you use them correctly, you will put more fish on the bank.